Okay.
All right. Good morning, everybody. We'll go ahead and get started here. Ron, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
All right. Okay, so we will get started. Here is our annual year-end close procedures for Microsoft Dynamics GP. I'm going to go ahead and get started here by introducing the presenters for today. We have Ron Peterson, the Manufacturing Practice Manager at OTT, and then I am Sarah Britton, Senior ERP Consultant at OTT. Just a few notes before we get started here. You guys are all listed in listen-only mode, so we won't be able to hear you. If you have questions, feel free to raise your hand or type your questions in the question section here. A little agenda. We try to follow this as much as we can. However, a lot of times we find ourselves getting way ahead of the time. I don't anticipate this lasting an hour and a half, but you know, that really just kind of depends on how many questions we have at the end of the webinar or during the webinar. We'll start here by doing the welcome and introductions. Kind of already did introductions. We'll go through the install and upgrade steps. At that point, we will switch over and go through the receivables management, payables management, fixed assets, and general ledger. Then we'll have Ron come on here and talk about manufacturing and field service, sales order processing, purchase order processing, and inventory control. And then finally, we'll finish up with HR and payroll, and then any questions that may arise as we go through here. So install and upgrade overview. The 2024 year-end release is inclusive of the October 2024 release. So what that means is the year-end update, when installed, will also include all of the fixes and enhancements that were included in the major release that came out here in October. The only supported upgrade path to the current release is from the release 1 year back from the current. That is in accordance with the modern life cycle. So you must be on 18.6.1695 or later. That is the year-end release that came out last year. The update must be installed at all servers and workstations that have Microsoft Dynamics GP installed on them. Otherwise, a version error will occur on any workstation where that release is not installed, and you will not be able to run GP until that update is installed on that workstation. Before you install this update or any updates, you should check compatibility with any third-party or ISV products that you have. Typically, they will release versions of their upgrade or their software that is compatible with the current release from Microsoft. Sometimes they don't have it right away, so that's why we want to make sure that if you are using any third-party products, that they have a compatible release with whatever version you're going to. So the year-end was released on 11/19. There are no changes to payroll for the Secure Act 2.0 because the IRS extended the date to January of 2026. The IRS is pushing for all businesses to file information returns electronically. So your W-2s, your 1099s, the IRS really wants those in electronic file format. GP does not file 1099s electronically. If you still print payables 1099 forms in GP with the October release of last year, all 1099 forms, that means all forms, DIV, INT, miscellaneous, or NEC, they will print with lines, so you no longer need to purchase forms at year end. The fixed assets, if you do have luxury auto depreciation, there were some luxury auto depreciation changes included in this year-end release. The form change, the only regulatory form change that came with this year-end release was to the ACA 1095C, and that change was only an instruction change only. So on the back page or the second page, is the listing of instructions. It was a small change to the instructions, not the actual form itself. So pre-install and upgrade tips, you want to make sure that you back up the Dynamics database and any other company databases before applying any sort of upgrade or update to your GP database. Export all of your modified forms and modified reports and forms to package files. So that creates a backup file in case something happens during the upgrade as well. You want to back up then also the modified reports and forms dictionary files. And then, I mean, this is on there, it's just a tip. Configure a test environment to test the upgrade prior to installing in the live environment. There's not very many scenarios where that's really needed or required. It's just a tip out there. If you have a very complicated environment with a lot of third-party products, it doesn't hurt to run this in a test environment prior to running in production. If you have a very simple environment, really not needed, but you will always want to make sure that you back up your Dynamics database and all company databases. So the user running the update must have local admin rights. There are two components to the first update installation. You want to update the application install. So that's applying the update to the installation. And then you're going to run through GP utilities and upgrade Dynamics and all of the company databases. Typically, in how we run things is we update the SQL Server first to upgrade the databases in utilities. So we'll run that upgrade on the SQL Server first, and then once complete there, we will go and run the upgrade on any workstations where GP is installed. Verify that the Microsoft Dynamics GP installation used to upgrade the databases includes all additional product installations. So what that means is, let's say that previously we didn't have fixed assets installed, and I went and installed fixed assets on a workstation, and then I'm running that upgrade on the server. That server doesn't have fixed assets installed, so that upgrade, when I go through utilities, is not going to upgrade the fixed assets product. So what we always want to make sure, and what we're careful about here at OTT, is making sure that all of the workstations, especially the SQL Server, has all of the products installed at any time. Now, we typically do recommend that the workstations stay pretty consistent so that nothing like this does occur during an update. But in the very least, we want to make sure that any product that gets installed on a workstation also gets installed on the installation on the SQL Server. If the installation of the MSP does fail, you can refer to the Windows installer log or the Windows Event Viewer for more information. There's also a link here to a KB article for steps to create a Windows installer log. When searching for the Windows installer log, you just want to look for return value 3. Also, if installation of the NSP fails, you can try installing via the command line. Again, there's a link to another KB article. Personally, I've not had to use either one of these options, so they're there for your information, but not something that frequently happens or typically causes issues during an upgrade. Just a tip, you can enable a DEX SQL log prior to upgrading the databases and utilities. There is another KB article on steps to enable a DEX SQL log. If the database upgrade fails, do not restore the databases, because at that point of failure, the troubleshooting can take place at that point. If there's a red X that appears next to a company name in the update company window, that means that the table conversion for that company failed. So there is a link there to upgrade Hot Topic for GP for troubleshooting steps. Again, these are things that don't happen frequently, especially with a year-end update, but they are there for your information just in case. As you go through the upgrade, all of your modified reports and form dictionaries should be upgraded as well using the Update Modified Forms and Reports process. And that's located in the additional tasks window in that utilities program as well. After the update, if you notice account numbers printing funny on reports, for example, the trial balance, your GL account number is missing numbers or just looks really funky, or the report is crashing when people are trying to print it. It could be a damaged reports dictionary or forms dictionary. That does happen from time to time in an update. So typically what we do to fix that is basically just recreate that reports dictionary. And that's why it's important to have that package file of the backed up modified reports taken before you do the update so that we can then recreate the reports dictionary if there is some sort of issue with that after the upgrade. So if all modified reports and form dictionaries are shared, so they're located out on a shared network, the dictionaries only need to be upgraded once, and that will work for everyone. The MSP file can be pushed out to client workstations using automatic client update, group policy, or other mass deployment tools. So after the upgrade or update is completed in utilities, we do suggest that you back up the Dynamics database and all company databases once again, and then once again export out all of the modified reports and forms to package files. So you have a pre-upgrade backup and a post-upgrade backup. So that is about it for the installation of the year-end. We will move into receivables management now. So when should receivables management year-end close be done? So both the calendar year end and the fiscal year close should be done at the end of the calendar year prior to posting any transactions in the next calendar year. If your fiscal year is done, or if you have a different fiscal year, you would want to do that at the end of your fiscal year and before you post any transactions in the beginning of the new fiscal year. So what does the year-end process do? And I guess what are the effects of year-end process? So the calendar year-end close, it clears the calendar year-to-date finance charges and moves them to the last year calendar field in customer finance charge summary. The fiscal year-end close transfers all amounts other than the calendar year-to-date finance charge amount to the last year column in the customer summary. So if you're in the customer summary using the amounts since last closed view, those amounts would be updated by this year-end. So the steps to complete the receivables management year-end: you want to post all receivables transactions for the year. So going through and making sure that any transactions for the current year are completely posted. We do suggest making a pre-year-end closing backup. And then you go through the process to close the calendar year and possibly close the fiscal year as well if your calendar and fiscal are in the same. And then you want to close the tax year. And then after that closing, it is suggested to make a post-year-end closing backup. And again, whether or not you guys do these backups, that's up to you. It's recommended, but not required. So some key points to remember: make restorable backups when recommended in the knowledge-based article that's linked there. Receivables management is not completely date sensitive. There are some date sensitive features, so the best option is to close the year on time. Just sticking with receivables management here for a second. There have been several clients that I've worked with that have gone in, they've actually never closed receivables. That is not unheard of. Closing receivables is not a requirement. It's not mandatory. However, some of those fields in some of the columns in your smart list, some of the inquiry fields, that type of thing, that's really the only thing that gets affected at the receivables year-end close. So if you were to go into smart list and try to run some of those smart lists that are returning data for last year or year to date, that information in those columns last year or year to date may be incorrect if you do not properly close your receivables. And again, there's a lot of people that just don't even close them at all. No reason to panic. If you forget to close before you start entering transactions for the new year, it's not a cause for panic. Like I said, it's just that some of your inquiry windows and those fields or columns in smart list may be incorrect. The data is still going to be correct. This data will still be whole in GP. It's just we might need to look at a different way of gathering the information for last year or year to date if that receivables closing is not done on time. All right, moving into payables. Payables is really kind of very similar to receivables. The calendar year end close routine should be run at the end of the year prior to posting transactions in the new year for the calendar. Same thing for the fiscal. If your calendar and fiscal year are the same, you can do them both at the same time. So the payables management year-end close process, what that does is in the vendor yearly summary window, the calendar close transfers the 1099 amounts from year-to-date column to the last year column when using the amounts since last close view. The fiscal close, it transfers all of the other amounts from the year-to-date column to the last year column in the same window there, the amounts since last close view. Same thing with, there will be some smart list columns that will be affected by that as well. So what steps should I take when closing the year? You want to post all of your payable transactions for the year. We do suggest then after posting, print the historical age trial balance report. Install the year-end update if necessary. This year-end update does not include any 1099 changes. So whether you install that year-end update, I guess is really kind of internal. I mean, we do suggest obviously that everybody stay as up to date as possible on their GP installs. After installing the year-end update, you want to go through and verify and edit your 1099 information. Print your 1099 statements. Then you make a pre-year-end backup. Close the year. You can close the fiscal periods, and then suggest making a post-year-end backup. I really honestly believe it's a little redundant to create a year-end backup and a post-year-end backup for payables and receivables. Highly suggested, strongly recommended for financial. But if you're not doing all of this stuff at the same time, if you're doing your closing receivables and your closing payables, and then maybe 2 weeks later you're closing financial, you don't have to have those pre and post backups for every single thing that you close. I would suggest if you're closing receivables and payables at the same time that you do create a backup prior to making those year-end closing. So some points to remember, like receivables management, payables management is not fully date sensitive. So it's still recommended that you process your year-end closing routines at the actual year-end. So what that means is it's not going to go out and evaluate transactions that have a date in 2024 and cut those off from transactions that have a date in 2025. Anything that you enter prior to that year-end close, regardless of what the date is on the transaction, that will be included in the year when you close it. So if it's NGP, it's included in this fiscal year if you enter it before you close the year-end. The vendor should be marked as a 1099 vendor at the time the transactions are posted or paid in order for that 1099 information to auto-populate. There's a KB article if that vendor was not marked as a 1099 vendor at the time that the transactions were posted, there's a KB article there on how you can fix that. You can use the 1099 details window to edit the 1099 amounts individually. So 1099 forms, all of the 1099 forms, like I discussed earlier, now print with lines, which means that you can print them to plain paper rather than purchasing the forms. In this year end, there were no 1099 form changes, so no difference to the way that those 1099s are printing. 1099 electronic submission may be required. So last year, beginning with last year, the IRS really started pushing for more businesses to file electronically. So all businesses with the 2023 tax year beginning with a combined 10 or more information returns. Information returns includes W-2 and 1099s. So if you have more than 10 combined, you must file electronically. Those 1099s must be filed electronically. Unfortunately, GP does not support the electronic filing of 1099s. The IRS does provide a free portal that will allow businesses to upload a file for electronic filing. So you can use GP to print your 1099s and then go to that IRS free portal to create the report and upload to do that electronic filing. Microsoft has provided a SQL view that can be used to generate the Excel file that will then be accepted by the IRS. There are many vendors, like lots of vendors, that provide 1099 print and e-file options if you'd rather go that route. So there are a ton of vendors that will allow you to import a file with all of your 1099 information on it, and they will then take that file and print the 1099s and send them to your vendors, and then also do the e-filing at that time as well. If you want the free option, you go to the IRS portal and upload and print the 1099s and send them to your vendors yourself. Otherwise, for a fee, you can find a vendor that does the whole thing for you. So basically what you're doing is you're just giving that vendor the file from GP, and they will produce the 1099 documents, send them to your vendors, and do the e-filing. So that's really it for payables management. We will move on to fixed assets. So when should the year-end close be done for fixed assets? That year-end close should be processed after payables management is closed and before closing general ledger. So each book can be closed separately, but all books must be closed before you can do any processing in fixed assets for the new year. So you don't have to close all of the books at once, but you do have to close each one in order to be able to process fixed assets for the new year. So the year-end close process for fixed assets, if you go into the asset general information window, what happens when you do that year-end close is the year-to-date maintenance amount is cleared from the expand last maintenance date window, and then the quantity is copied to the begin quantity field in the expand quantity window. In the asset book window, the year-to-date depreciation amount is cleared. The cost basis is copied to begin year cost field. The life-to-date depreciation is then copied to begin reserve field, and the salvage value is copied to begin salvage field. So when you do that year-end close, those are the changes that are made. In the book setup window, the current fiscal year is increased for each closed book. So once you close a book, the current fiscal year will increase in that book setup window. Dynamics GP 2015 and later has fixed assets year-end report. So that's a status report of all assets affected by the close. So if you're on GP 2015 or a later version, you do have access to that fixed assets year-end report. So steps to be taken when you close the year. You want to do the year-end close for your payables management first. So that's making sure that any payables transactions that will feed into fixed assets are complete. Then you want to enter all of your fixed asset transactions for the year. Go through and depreciate all of the assets through the end of the year. After you do that depreciation, you want to perform your GL posting process. If there are any required year-end reports that you want to run, at that point, now would be the time to run those year-end reports. Before doing that year-end close, you want to go through and verify your calendar and quarter setup is correct for the current year as well as the future year. We do suggest creating a backup at that time and then completing the year-end close. After fixed assets is complete, then you can move on to your general ledger year-end close. So when should the general ledger year-end close be done? That should be done after you have completed the year-end close process for all of the other modules. So the other modules should be closed in the following order. You should do inventory, receivables, payables, and then fixed assets. The year-end close process will move all open year transactions from the GL 20,000 table to the GL 30,000 table. So it creates the balance brought forward journal entries. Those entries are created in the GL 20,000 table. It will remove inactive GL accounts without a balance or a history if that option is marked at the time that you do the year-end close. GP 2013 R2 and up will also clear out unit accounts if that option is marked as well. The balances for all balance sheet accounts are rolled forward to the new year. So before you do that year-end close, your beginning balance for the new fiscal year that you have open is going to be at 0 until you run that year-end close report. After you run the year-end close, the beginning balance in the new year for the balance sheet accounts will be the same as the ending balance from the prior year you are closing. The P&L accounts are rolled into retained earnings if you close to one retained earnings account, or with the amount from the P&L accounts in that division if you close to divisional retained earnings. P&L accounts all have a 0 balance at the beginning of the new year. The fiscal period tables are updated to mark the year just closed as a historical year. Analytical accounting is automatically closed. And then your year-end close report prints. That year-end close report cannot be reprinted. It will print once at the time that you do the close. Basically, really all it is it's the journal entry that shows that it was it created that year-end journal. You can always reprint the journal entry. It's not a huge deal if for whatever reason during the close process the report crashes or doesn't get sent to the printer. Not a big deal. You can just locate that year-end closing journal entry and print the journal entry if you need a copy form of that. So what steps should I take to close the year? You want to complete closing procedures for all other modules first. Post final adjusting entries. You want to perform the account posting type review. So that account posting type review, what that does is it goes through and it looks at any new accounts or any accounts really that you have set up to make sure that they were properly identified as balance sheet accounts or profit and loss accounts. If you incorrectly created an account and identified it as a P&L account when it should be a balance sheet account, GP is not going to correctly handle that account at year end. Like I said before, the P&L accounts, those are all zeroed out at the end of the year, where the balance sheet accounts are rolled forward. So you want to make sure that any accounts that you have set up have the correct posting type. We do have steps in our year-end booklet for how to create a smart list that will list out the proper, it will help you create a smart list that will help you identify if there are any accounts that are set up incorrectly. We do suggest that you perform file maintenance, which would mean check links. We do want you to go through and verify your general ledger settings. So there are some settings in the general ledger setup that we want you to double check and make sure that they did not get modified throughout the year, because what happens is if in that general ledger settings you had gone in there and unmarked the option to keep GL history, when you close the year, instead of moving the transactions from the GL 20,000 to the 30,000, it's actually just going to remove everything from the GL 20,000. That's why it's important to create a backup and double check those general ledger settings. All right. And then that does lead into the next step where you want to make sure that you have a backup. We do strongly recommend and suggest that you do create that backup because there are things during the GL close process that could go wrong. Typically your other modules, you're not going to have an issue with closing those, but with the GL, strongly recommended that you have a backup of the database. And then we want you to go ahead and print reports. So we would suggest that you print the trial balance. Also keep and print a copy of your final financial statements, because we do suggest after you do the year-end close to go through and make sure that the financial statements and the trial balance and all of that stuff still matches. Make sure that you set up the new fiscal year, and then you can go through and you're going to close the year. After you close the year and perform that year-end closing process, you can go and close all of the fiscal periods for all modules for that year. And then, like I said, we do suggest that you print the summary trial balance and just verify that everything after the year-end close matches with what it was before year-end close. If you need to, adjust the budget numbers for next year. We do have on here again to make another backup. Whether or not you do that, that's really kind of up to you. So some important points to remember: make a backup. Please make a backup before you do your year-end close. If you see any errors during that year-end close, don't just click through them and ignore them. You want to review any errors that pop up during that year-end close process. All other users have to be out of GP when you perform the year-end close. It will not allow you to do that year-end close when there are other users logged into GP. We do suggest that you perform that year-end close at the server. You also want to make sure that you have enough free space on the server to allow for the GL 20,000 table to double in size, because what it's doing is it's creating the transactions in the 30,000 table before removing them from the 20,000 table. So it will basically double the size of the GL 20,000 table. The year-end close process routine does seem to hang at about 50% sometimes, or sometimes at a different percentage. Let it run. Don't interrupt it. Don't assume that it's stuck. It goes like, you know, with a lot of those progress bars, all of a sudden it says it goes right up to 50, like within 2 seconds, and then it sits at 50 for 10 minutes. And then it'll, you know, quickly shoot up to 100. That progress bar doesn't always necessarily mean anything. So don't assume that it is broken. Let it process. Having said that, obviously it doesn't need to process for 48 hours or so. So, you know, if it's getting to be 4 hours or even longer than that, at that point, we may want to take a look at it. But if it's hanging for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, assume that it's still working in the background and don't try to force close GP. Couple things that I will say. I know that sometimes people leave their year-end or their general ledger open for several months, sometimes 6, 7, 8 months after the end of the fiscal year or calendar year, because they're waiting for final adjusting entries from their auditors. It's really not necessary to do that. You can now with Dynamics GP, you can post those final adjusting entries into history, or you can reopen the year, post those adjusting entries, and then reclose the year. It makes the most amount of sense to close or do the year-end close process for GL when most of your adjusting entries or most of your entries are done for the year, so that you can roll forward those balance sheet accounts instead of having those at 0 and not being able to get good reporting out of GP. Once the majority of your year-end process is complete, go ahead and close the year. And then when the adjusters come back or the auditors come back with those final adjusting entries, we can determine at that time whether you want to just post those entries into history or whether you want to reopen the fiscal year and then enter those transactions and then reclose at that point. All right, so moving on to manufacturing. Ron, I'm assuming you want me to just keep sharing my screen and I can just click through these as you'd like?
Yeah, I think that probably work the best.
Okay, sounds good.
Cool. All right. Looks like I've been here before. All right. All right, so we're going to go through the close procedures for manufacturing, field service for what they are, as well as sales, purchasing, and inventory. So just to kick it off, we'll talk a little bit about manufacturing, field service. Not a whole lot to do at all. There is no predefined procedure to close the year for either manufacturing or field service. However, the 2 recommended steps there are recommended so that the inventory module does close correctly. So I guess regardless of which product that you own to do work orders or manufacturing orders, the key thing to accomplish prior to the year end is just to treat it like you would any month end. So if you use the Dynamics GP bill of materials or GP manufacturing or Horizons, you would, regardless, you would want to process any material issues that are hanging out there or labor transactions that would need to be recorded in the current month. You'd also, of course, want to post and close any orders that need to be completed. And as with manufacturing, if you use the field service module, be sure to process any contracts or service calls, returns, equipment transactions, or field service work orders prior to the month end or year end, so that the appropriate revenues and expenses are recognized. And if you are using GP's manufacturing module, if there's it has its own separate process for managing standard costs. So if you're using that, now would be a great time to roll up and revalue your inventory. All right, next slide. Okay, right, so sales order processing. So again, similar to the last 2, there's no predefined procedure to close the year for sales order processing. However, they are recommended to ensure that the inventory module does close correctly. And these should look familiar. They're the same processes that should be performed on a monthly basis as well as year end. So number one, process and post all transactions for the year. Just be sure all invoicing or sales order processing transactions have been entered and posted. We recommend this to ensure that the historical information is accurate for the year being closed. If you do need to enter future transactions, just create a new batch with the transactions for the future year, but don't post the batch until the current year has been closed. So the next step, reconciling, that's over in sales utilities, reconcile, remove. The reconcile does a few things. It verifies, it'll rip through all of the sales orders and verify that the subtotals are correct, the quantities for serial and lot numbers are correct, the quotes, orders, invoices, back orders, and return in document quantity and dollar information are correct. And then the last one here is the remove sales documents. So there are two parts to that utilities. One is the reconcile and the other is the remove. The remove process pertains to quotes and orders and back order documents. It will move those completed documents from work to history. Now, most of the time, completed documents are automatically moved from work to history during the invoice process. However, there are some cases where there are no remaining quantities to transfer, but the document is stuck in the work tables until it's moved into history using this utility, using the remove sales document window. All right, next slide. All right, purchasing. Okay, again, there are no predefined procedures to close purchasing, but we do recommend these to, again, ensure that the inventory module closes correctly. So these processes are recommended for year end, but again, they typically are also performed on a monthly basis, as well as year end. All right, so first one here, process and post all transactions for the year. Make sure that all the receiving, invoice matching, and returns transactions are posted. You can get through those through purchasing transaction series post. And then you'll want to also reconcile the purchase orders. And that's done in the purchasing utilities, reconcile purchase documents. And the reconciling will verify that the totals on the purchase order match the totals recorded in the accounting records. So it verifies it and recalculates and adjusts, if necessary, the quantities that are in the canceled column, the subtotals, the extended costs and remaining quantities, all the purchase order subtotals, and the extended costs and discounts. All right, next slide. All right, and so the other portion of that in the purchasing routines, remove completed purchase orders. The remove completed purchase orders is used to remove any closed or canceled documents from the active purchase work order tables into history. You really should remove your completed purchase orders periodically. Some people do it monthly or weekly, but you should at least do it at year-end close. Again, it's just going to take all of the completely done purchase orders, take them out of the work table, and put them into history. Second part here is printing additional reports. So those would be things like the historical received not invoice report. Just print that off and archive it, and as well as the well, I guess that's about it. All right, next. All right, now we're moving into inventory. Okay, so now we've gone through sales, purchasing, and we're in inventory. Now again, be sure that all invoicing, sales order processing, purchase order receiving and invoice matching, returns, bill of material assembly, inventory transactions, all of those things are posted before you close the year. And again, if you want or need to enter future period transactions, just create a new batch with those transactions, but don't post them till after the year's been closed. So the inventory control year end should be done at the end of your fiscal year, but of course before any new transactions that would affect inventory are posted. All right. Okay. All right. Let's see here. So year end, what does closing the year end do, or what does it affect? Well, it does a few things. It transfers all the summarized current year from the item quantities table, the quantity, cost, sales amounts from that window to the last year for items which you have been keeping the sales history. And once those are copied off, then it will update the items beginning quantity from the quantity on hand for each site. It also zeroes the quantity sold field on the quantity maintenance for each location. So you have a fresh starting point at 0. And it will also give you the option to remove items that you're not using anymore. So if you've marked them as discontinued, it can remove those. And it will also remove sold receipts, lot attributes. And if you're not using Dynamics GP's manufacturing, you can also update the item's standard cost. Okay. Okay, so what do I need to do to close the year? So as we've iterated before, make sure that you've entered all the purchase orders, purchase order processing, invoicing, sales orders, and inventory transactions. You want to reconcile purchase order and sales orders, which we talked about. And this would also be a really good time to coordinate a physical inventory. So go out to the warehouse and do a full physical. So you have very good starting quantities for the year, and then post those adjustments of the physical inventory before you close the year. You should also print any additional reports for archiving, like the stock status report, the purchase receipts, the turnover report, transaction history, and then close the year. I think that's in the utilities. Yep. All right, so some key points to remember. In the instructions that you were emailed, there's some points there to make backups. I would suggest making a backup before you get to the point of closing inventory. In case anything goes wrong, you can restore it. Because the closing of the inventory is based on having good sales orders and purchase order processing numbers. If you are using those modules, then you should reconcile those modules to make sure the quantities of those in those documents are correct, so that when you do close inventory, the numbers for inventory are good, as they're based on good sales orders and sales order and purchase order numbers. And the order to do that is reconciling sales, purchasing, and then reconciling inventory. As again, reconciling inventory looks at sales orders and purchase orders. All right, if you haven't already, the year end may be a great time to implement the HITB, the Historical Inventory Trial Balance Report, which is new from version 10, so it goes way back. And again, as I had mentioned before, if you are using manufacturing, it would be a great time to use GP's manufacturing module to roll up and revalue the standard cost inventory. All right, last one, I think. Yep, yep, and then this is just a number of knowledge base articles in case there are any issues. There likely will not be. But you can access the specific year-end closing, why you should, this technical reasons of why you should run reconcile in the order recommended. What happens if you accidentally click the close button twice in inventory, and then some technical information about removing discontinued items, when it can do it, when it can't do it, when that's marked during the inventory close process. All right, that's it.
Hey, Ron.
Yeah.
We did have one question come in from Christine Chapman. She states that they have a PO that they want to clear from the system. The PO is from March of 2017 and has an invoice that is not posted, and therefore they cannot close the PO. So how can they clear it from the system? I don't know if that's something that you can answer now or if we want to follow up with Christine.
If it's, yeah, we'd probably follow up with Christine, likely void it, but kind of depending on what we're looking to do to get out of that. But yeah, he'll make a note to follow up with Christine after the call.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
All right. And I think that is all of the questions that we have right now. Going through here, I don't see anything else. All right, so moving on to payroll. Okay, so when should the payroll year-end close be done? That year-end close should be done after all of the current pay runs are complete. So all pay runs for 2024 should be completed. We do suggest making a backup. And then you want to do that after the backup and after all pay runs for 2024 are complete. You want to make sure you do that year-end before you process any new pay runs in 2025. The year-end close process, it creates the year-end wage file. That year-end wage file contains the annual wage information that is used to generate your W-2s, W-3s, the 1099-Rs, your 1095s, and then your electronic filing for the year being closed. There were no significant payroll form changes included in the 2024 year-end release. The only change was, again, to that ACA 1095C instructions on the back page. So it's insignificant, I would say. So you don't have to feel like you're in a rush to get that year-end file or a year-end update complete before the end of the year and before you start filing or creating pay runs in 2025. Obviously, we do recommend and suggest that you stay as current on your GP release as possible, but it's not a huge rush to get that year-end release installed at this point because there were no significant form changes. So you can process your 1095s your W-2s, your 1099s, everything can be processed without that year-end release this year. So it just gives us a little bit more time to plan getting your GP install updated. So what steps should I take to close the year? Verify the version of GP. The only supported upgrade path is to the current release 1 year back. Again, from what I'm saying here is that you do not need that year-end release in order to close the year because, again, there were no form changes. But you want to complete all of your 2024 pay runs. And then I would also complete your monthly and quarterly period end procedures for 2024. You will want to create a year-end backup, a pre-year-end backup. I think there's some IRS regulations or requirements to keep that backup available in case they need it for some reason. We say in here, install the year-end update. You don't necessarily need to do that in this order this year. Again, there are no form changes, so you can skip updating GP, complete all of your 2024 pay runs, do your monthly and quarterly year-end, make your backup, and then go right to creating the year-end wage file. After you create that year-end wage file, it is suggested to make a post-year-end backup. It's a recommendation. You don't have to make a post-year-end backup. It doesn't hurt to have it, but if you're low on space in your server or any sort of storage requirements where you're getting low, you can skip that step. You want to go through and after you do that year-end close, verify that the W-2 and 1099R statement information is correct. Make any edits to your W-2s or your 1095Cs if that is necessary. And you want to go and review your W-2 validation report, print those reports, print your 1094s, print your W-2s, print your W-3 transmittal if you're going to, make any edits to your 1099Rs, run your 1099R validation report and your forms along with the 1096 transmittal form. And then the next step there is create your W-2 electronic file. I have in there that it's optional. If you have more than 10 employees and 10 vendors that you're putting 1099s to, it's not really optional anymore. You want to create that W-2 electronic file because you will need to electronically file those W-2s. Then you want to go through and close the fiscal periods for the payroll series. At that point, after you have created that year-end wage file, done all of your pay runs for 2024, run through and printed your 1099 or your W-2s and all of that, done your W-2 electronic file. Before you do any 2025 payroll, you'll want to install that 2025 payroll tax update. So install is kind of a weird way of saying it. There's a process within GP. There were no tax table changes this year, but there will be rate updates. So it's not necessarily really an installation. What we do is we suggest that you run it from the server. It's going out and it's retrieving tax updates to update your tax tables. Only it needs to be done from one workstation. If you try to run it from somewhere other than the server, you may receive an error. If you receive an error, you just go back in and try to run it from the server, and most likely that will clear up the error. There are more detailed steps in our OTT year-end booklet, which you all should have received as well, on how to obtain that tax update. So there is an alternate checklist if you need to process 2025 pay runs before printing your W-2s. You can see that OTT year-end booklet for that alternate checklist. The year-end wage file, that's held in the UPR 10-100 and through the UPR 10-107 tables. That includes the information for your year-end wage report, your edit and print W-2s, and your create W-2 electronic files. Those are held in those tables that are listed here. Prior to processing any pay runs in the new year, you want to make sure that you install the payroll tax update round 1. There's the path and how to get to that tax update. If the automatic tax update doesn't work, there is a manual way to download and install that tax update as well. Important due dates. So your W-2 statements are due to your employees by January 31st. Social Security Administration due there as well. Your 1095-C statements are due to your employees by March 3rd, but they're actually due to the Social Security Administration on February 28th, unless filed electronically, and then they are due on March 31st. There are some KB resources here, just general year-end closing procedures, links to different knowledge-based articles that can help you out, as well as the OTT year-end booklet that you guys should receive as well. That does have a little bit more detailed steps and detailed information in regards to the processes that you go through as you close out the modules. And then if you do have any additional questions, you need assistance or any clarification on anything that was discussed today or that is contained in our year-end booklet, feel free to reach out to us. Technical support line phone number is listed there, as well as our email address that does go to a support email address or support email box, where somebody who is working support that day will be able to either route your question to the correct resource or be able to answer as needed. So again, to clarify a little bit, no major changes included in this year-end update. We do recommend that everybody stay as current as possible. So, you know, if now's not a great time to install that year-end update or the update from October, that's fine, but I would strongly recommend shortly into the new year that we get some time on the calendar to get that installation and that update completed. But it is not necessary for 1099s or W-2s to produce those from GP this year. If you do have some luxury auto depreciation, you want to make sure that you get that year-end update in there. If you want to print your 1095s, you know, I think you'd probably be okay printing your 1095s without that year-end update. But again, there is that slight instruction change on the back page that is included in the year-end update. So if you have any questions in regards to the timing of the year-end update, if you'd like to get something scheduled, if you'd like to discuss options, questions about year-end processing, anything like that, please feel free to reach out to us. Take a look at the booklet. That may provide a little bit more information for you and answer any questions that you have. But if there are additional questions after that, please feel free to reach out to Ron or I or to our support department. If it's something particular for Ron and I, our support department would be able to get it to us as well. Otherwise, I think that's really all that we have for today's webinar. I can stay on here for a few minutes. Just make sure that there are no additional questions that come in. I don't see anything currently. And again, if you have questions, you can certainly follow up with us later as well. But I do want to thank you all for attending the webinar today, taking your time out of your day. And if you have anything, just let us know. Thank you.
Just as a follow-up, I think Eric will be sending out, if he already hasn't sent out the PowerPoint and the instructions, he'll be sending that out as well as a link to the webinar, the recorded webinar.
Thanks, Ron. Yeah, I think he did send out that the documentation this morning. So
Just the webinar link. Yep. Okay. Perfect.
Okay, I think we want to go ahead and end the webinar then. Again, any questions, you guys just feel free to reach out to us and we can assist you. Otherwise, thank you for attending and have a great new year.